Hey guys, Negative9 here, how is it going everybody, and welcome to another video. One of the things that I am constantly looking forward to in Guild Wars 2 is exploring more of Tyria. Going back to old locations from Guild Wars 1 and discovering new ones has always been an exciting prospect for me, and now that we have our first expansion under our belt, I think we can do a little bit of speculation on where we could be heading next. So in this video I will go over the top 5 locations for future expansions that I think a majority of the community would like to see in the future of Guild Wars 2. Number 5 is the Dominion of Winds. South of Kessex Hills and east of the Caldon Forest lies the Dominion of Winds, which is home of the Tengu and has been inaccessible to players since the launch of Guild Wars 2. At first glance, the Dominion of Winds looks pretty small. Probably too small for a full-scale expansion, but in conjunction with other zones in the Sea of Sorrows or perhaps other parts of Tyria, it could be enough to feature in one. The Dominion of Winds has been walled off from the rest of the world since the rise of Zhaitan, and not much is known about what goes on within, other than that destroyer burrows have been appearing on both Tengu and human sides of the wall. This could mean that the Tengu and the Dominion of Winds could be heavily involved in an expansion featuring Primordius, the first Elder Dragon to awaken. In fact, Primordius has yet to breach the surface of Tyria, preferring to stick to the depths. The only signs of his presence being his burrowing minions, the Destroyers, and the hordes of Asura, Skrit, and other races that have been forced to the surface. This means that Primordius could effectively strike anywhere, even a place that has been walled off for the past century. The Dominion of Winds could even serve as a starting zone for the Tengu if they were to become a playable race, which is definitely something the community has been asking for. While the Dominion of Winds is certainly not the most likely place for an expansion, there are still plenty of reasons for us to go there, hopefully in the not too distant future. Number 4, the Far Shiverpeaks. The Far Shiverpeaks are the northernmost portion of the Shiverpeak Mountains that are the original home of the Norn and the Kodan. The races of the Shiverpeaks were forced south when Jormag, the Elder Dragon of Ice and Snow, arose and tempted certain annihilation. Aesgir Dragonrender, a brave Norn hero who lived through the rising of Jormag, attempted to do battle with the dragon, wielding the power of a Jotun scroll and with the help of the spirits of the wild. While the dragon was not defeated and the Nord were indeed forced south, Aesgir did manage to take a tooth from Jormag's maw as proof that the Elder Dragons can be harmed, being the first to do so. Aesgir established Holbrook and placed the Fang of the Serpent in the Great Lodge where it resides to this day. This relic of Jormag stands as a challenge to the Norn, and it is believed that the hero who manages to chip or dent the dragon's tooth will lead the Norn home, back to the Far Shiverpeaks, where they will break the dragon's icy grip. A return to the Far Shiverpeaks would obviously occur in an expansion focused on the fight against Jormag, and I'd be really interested to see what has happened to all the old Norn settlements and Kodan settlements, and also if the Eye of the North would somehow have some role to play. Number 3 is Elona. Once one of the 4 main human kingdoms, Elona, known as the Land of the Golden Sun, is a continent southeast of Tyria that is chock full of fascinating lore that I would just love to go back to. Like many other continents, Elona has been cut off from central Tyria for quite some time, which is part of the reason why returning is such a fascinating prospect. Elona's isolation can be put down to several major factors, the first being the presence of Kralkatork in the Crystal Desert, and of Zhaitan's Risen near its northern border. The second being the nature of Elona's leadership. As far as we know, Elona is still under control of the undead lich Palawa Joko. Over 450 years ago, Palawa led an army from his home in the Desolation into Vabbi, a northern province, where he began his conquest of Elona. While Palawa Joko was temporarily successful, he was eventually defeated by the great Khornan general Churai Asa. Churai sealed him beneath the sands of Elona, where he remained for a time, but centuries later, during the approach of nightfall, the magic that bound Palawa Joko was weakened, and he managed to escape. Palawa once again marched on Elona, and was again successful. Since then, we can only assume he has taken full control of Elona, and is now ruling over his ill-earned kingdom. The final contact we had with Elona occurred approximately 50 years ago, when the last of the Elonians fled the desert into Divinity's Reach. Although while I was researching this, I found an interesting tidbit on the Guild Wars 2 wiki that I had never heard before. It states that the Order of Whispers, who are in fact an ancient Elonian order, which I forget all the time, still have an unknown means of traveling between the 2 continents. And this information and the death of Zhaitan both mean that we have the foundations of a storyline that could possibly take us back to Elona should ArenaNet wish it. But who knows what evils could be waiting there for us. Number 2 is the Crystal Desert. I could have easily included the Crystal Desert with Elona because a lot of the story is the same. However, I do believe that a return to the Crystal Desert could happen independent of Elona, at least initially. And I also believe that the Crystal Desert could realistically be our next destination due to some of the events that have happened recently in Guild Wars 2. But first, I think we need to talk about the desert itself. The Crystal Desert acts as a land bridge between the continents of Tyria and Elona, and funnily enough, it was not always a desert. In fact, up until the exodus of the human gods, it was the Crystal Sea. When Abaddon was struck down, he fell into the southern half of the sea, transforming it into the Desolation, which would later, of course, become the domain of Palawajoko. The waters eventually receded from the northern half of the sea, leaving the Crystal Desert as it is today. After Churai also defeated Palawajoko, Churai took his people on a pilgrimage to Augury Rock in the Crystal Desert, where they would try to ascend. Ascension is described as a state of communion with the old gods. Among other benefits, those who succeed in attaining it are able to travel through the mists, and with the right help can unlock hidden reserves of power. In 272 AE, Glint compiled the Flameseeker prophecies that foretold a group of chosen would rise and gain ascension in the Crystal Desert. Many great human civilizations have traveled to the Crystal Desert to ascend, seeking the guidance of the gods or believing that the prophesized few were among them, and almost all have failed. While Churai's people did fail to ascend, his ghost remained in the desert, and when the true chosen of the Flameseeker prophecies arrived, aka the player from Guild Wars 1, he aided them and was granted access into the Hall of Heroes. Now, shortly before Heart of Thorns launched in the living world, we encountered the spirit of Churai Asa again, where we learn about the process of ascension, and that a similar type of magic was being used to keep us out of a cave with the mark of the Forgotten upon it. This is the same cave that we saw Kaith enter with Glint's egg, which is another link to our current story. Glint was originally from the Crystal Desert, and now that we have recovered the egg in Heart of Thorns, I suspect that upon the hatching of the egg we could be returning to the Crystal Desert, to Glint's lair, to the location of her death, and most importantly to the location of the Elder Dragon, Kralkatorrik. Number 1 is Cantha. Cantha is a continent that the community has been asking for since before Guild Wars 2 even released, so naturally it had to have this number 1 spot. Cantha, the Empire of the Dragon, is southeast of central Tyria across the unending ocean. It is the most ancient human nation and, like Elona, has become cut off from the rest of the world. In 872 AE, the 26th Emperor of Cantha, Engzian, was assassinated by one of his very own bodyguards. The assassin Shiro Tagachi managed to absorb the Emperor's magic, but was quickly destroyed himself. When he died, the magic he had just absorbed was violently released in an event known as the Jade Wind, which turned seas into jade and creatures into stone. A century later, Shiro's spirit returned to haunt the Dragon Empire when he unleashed a plague upon the land that transformed its victims into shambling horrors. This affliction quickly became an epidemic that threatened total extinction, but the people of Cantha responded, and Shiro was defeated for the second time. The Ministry of Purity, an organization tasked with cleansing Cantha of Shiro Tagachi's affliction, slowly cultivated a xenophobic mentality among the people of Cantha. Eventually, in 1127 AE, the last known emperor, Emperor Usoku, unified Cantha's warring states and drove all non-humans out of Cantha once and for all. The few that did not agree with Usoku fled Cantha to Tyria and Elona, and since then, the rise of the Elder Dragon Zaitan has further isolated the continent as the dragon's naval army destroyed any ship that had once sailed in the seas nearby. The only signs of Cantha's influence are the occasional sailors that wash ashore on the tarnished coast. Again, I'd be very interested to see how the defeat of Zaitan could have influenced this situation, or if Cantha is now oppressed by another Elder Dragon, such as the Deep Sea Dragon. Either way, Cantha is probably the one thing that the community wants more than anything else, and while it may not be our next expansion, I think there is still a chance we could return at some point in the future. Now we also have to keep in mind with this speculation and with these locations that there are only 4 Elder Dragons left, so some of these locations may be seen in the living world and not necessarily in full-blown expansions. Anyways guys, this is a topic that I get extremely excited about, as you could probably tell by the length of this video, so I should probably not extend it any longer than it has to be. So thanks for watching guys, be sure to leave your thoughts in the comments below and feel free to subscribe for videos like this in the future. I'll see you guys next time.